Welcome back to Cinematic. I'm Ryan, and I'm back. We took a week off there. We actually went down to San Diego. I took a minute at Legoland, of all places. We were there for like a timeshare. Don't probably tell anybody, but went to Legoland. And that might come back. We each came home with a kit. We might put them together on stream later this week. So that would be fun. But needed to get back to this series because sometimes I watch one of these movies and I need, like, okay, this happens a lot, but I need to just know everything about it after the fact on a schedule. I wish I could spend, like, you know, a lot of people do one type of show. They spend an entire week learning about one type of thing. Not here at Ryan Runs. I do several shows and learn about them during the week. So this time for this particular series, Cinematic, I needed to learn everything I possibly could about the Guyver because I had some guesses by the time I was done. The first was that this needed to be based on some sort of Japanese anime or something like that. Second guess I had is that like one of the preeminent creature dudes from the 80s must have been involved in this, which I don't know. You know, I know like Stan Winston and Rob Bottin, and I feel like there's one more that I'd probably recognize the name, but couldn't tell you off the top of my head. So those were my two best guesses. So first guess, yes and no. It started out as a manga, but then they did actually make at least 2 animes of it after that. So check. And then as far as the creature feature dude goes, yeah. Also, the director, Screaming Mad George, as he's credited, or Joji Tani, as he's also known, was somebody that worked on Big Trouble in Little China, Predator, Nightmare on Elm Street 3 and 4. This was his directorial debut. So I actually don't know. I would imagine he still had a hand in the creature effects. And we're talking like, yes, we're in the 90s at this point. Yeah, 1991. I couldn't remember if it was 90 or 91. So pre-Jurassic Park, so forget about computers. We are like, okay, I don't know if we're peak, because again, some of those guys I mentioned are just absolute geniuses, but I would say Screaming Mad George is in the conversation. All of the effects in here, when I talk about special effects, are practical. Like they are those fleshy, rubbery, gooey monster makeups that we're thinking of from the 80s, from those guys that I mentioned. But Screaming Mad George, who I will refer to in full throughout this episode, was not the only director. The other was Steve Wong, who has more of a direct connection to the movies I've been talking about for this particular series, because this might be like the least qualified choice so far as those go. But in fact, I can't remember exactly how this one made the list. But Steve Wong also directed Drive, which came out in 97. I did an episode of Book Club or Movies on it. Myself and Matt Amber talked about that one, which stars Mark Dacascos, but like pre-Iron Chef, obviously, but is a legit martial artist, if you didn't know, Mark Dacascos. And just as a screen presence as well. Like everything he brought to, you know, actual Iron Chef, like imagine him in a narrative role, which he still did after Iron Chef. I want to say he had a recurring on, was it the Hawaii Five-0 reboot? I believe would make sense. Just always a delight. Get your Dacascos where you can. But Steve Wong also directed the sequel to this movie, Guyver Dark Hero, which I might do an episode on. I had originally planned to make this a double feature with that because I'm going chronologically, but oftentimes there's not a lot of value to that. And I don't know that there's a ton of difference, you know, within the genre between 91 and I think 94 when that came out. So I've been trying to combine movies, you know, save time, be efficient, but we'll see. For now, that's the best that I can do at shoehorning this particular film into the movies I've been watching for this series, but whatever, who cares? I've wanted to watch this for some time, and maybe you will too after the crawl. Let me read to you word for word the way this thing starts. At the beginning of time, aliens came to Earth to create the ultimate organic weapon. They created mankind. Period. End of thought. Some of the wordsmithing to this I'm very curious about because the next sentence says, by planting a special gene into man, they created the zoonoids. humans who can change at will into super monster soldiers. Eons later, the Zoonoid leader called the Zoolord has awakened and formed the Kronos Corporation to further develop the Zoonoid technology for world domination. Among the aliens' remains was found the unit. Alien remains, there just seems like there was some editing done because apparently this happened a long time ago and now there are alien remains. Was found the unit, a bio-boosted alien armor. Worn by the aliens, it serves as an ordinary shield. If the wearer is human, it increases his natural powers 100-fold. Seems like an oversight. He becomes the Guyver, but how to activate it remains a mystery. Dr. Tetsu Segawa, a research scientist at Kronos, senses danger if this unit is activated by the Zoolord. Now the doctor has stolen it and is on the run. And that is the actual ending of it. So anytime I see text, this doesn't just go for crawls, but subtitles, little, text with establishing shots. I don't know what it is. Probably film school. I always think, is this necessary? And honestly, this time they probably have a pretty good argument. It's a lot, but also it's not the only movie to feature an opening crawl that also stars Mark Hamill. Yes, but not in the way you might think. In fact, I just talked about this with Jonathan Blade on, I guess, last episode since we skipped a week where we talked about The Perfect Weapon, how Mariska Hargitay is in that movie for like a split second, and I bet yet still somehow miraculously shows up on some of the key art. I don't know if this is retroactively. It appears some of the VHS covers that I found, but Mark Hamill is on the cover, like split screen with the Guyver mask, like he is the Guyver. He is not the Guyver. He is a CIA agent, and like in the noiriest of senses, like he literally opens up and within a minute is smoking a cigarette by lamplight as he narrates a story in flashback. So not the Guyver, not the main character, but is probably the biggest name to come out of this before or after. So, you push that. But also, Jimmy Walker, JJ from Good Times, is in this doing exactly what you think JJ from Good Times would be doing. And Michael Berryman, who is maybe the embodiment of not knowing the name, but knowing the face. And in fact, maybe never forgetting the face. He was in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, The Hills Have Eyes, of course, and literally 107 other things. But he's great too. And he's front and center, actually, in this thing. He's not like the actual big bad. He's not the Zoolord. He is the kind of lieutenant Zoonoid. So the movie spends more time with him so we can have our finale. But he carries it like 100%. Like, why wouldn't he? And then the actual part of Luke Skywalker, by the which I mean kind of the young, naive kid that has greatness thrust upon him, is played by Jack Armstrong. This is Sean in this movie. And as such, is the one to discover the Guyver unit and accidentally trigger it while he's in the middle of getting bullied. And that's at the end of the first act. So I'm already moving pretty quickly because the movie does not. It's fairly slow in just about every sense of the word. The plotting, the line deliveries, and the action. Like there's a lot of throwing people across the screen, which they do a really good job of. Some of those stunt guys, I'm not downplaying what they're doing. They look like they might have been hurt, but don't come to this for the action. Like I said, this is pretty far removed from a lot of the movies that I've been talking about for this series, quite possibly the farthest removed. Either of the Ninja Turtle movies would be a better guys in rubber suits action movie, if that's what you're looking for. This is more of a fancy episode of Power Rangers, although I would still say the action in a standard Power Rangers episode is better. I'm trying to not undersell this. I was still floored by some of the stuff they did in the third act. In fact, it's been a few weeks since I watched this. I watched this before we did our episode on The Perfect Weapon. So I had to go back and review some stuff. And in watching the third act again, floored again. So don't get me wrong, especially when it comes to the effects. Like, that's easily where they spent most of their money. How much of a budget did this have? $3 million. So my guess would be that they spent $2.9 million on those costumes, because you kind of never a dull moment as far as that goes. And the Guyver suit itself is a biomechanical thing, or how do they put it? Symbiotic techno-organic, as they put it in the manga. There's like a bunch of moving parts to it, and a lot of that comes across in the editing for sure. Like, there are several different Guyver costumes, I'm sure, or stages of, in fact, but just some of the design behind that. And that goes for the Zonoids as well, even though there's a fair amount of transformation scenes, but obviously they wouldn't do that. Like, there's a fair amount of Zonoids, and I don't think they did transformation for every single one of them, because that's, like, even just Berryman's transformation at the very beginning is pretty extensive. You know, like, they have different models that do different things while he's transforming. You know, it's, some of it's nostalgia, sure. You know, like, I remember walking down the VHS aisle and seeing, especially horror movies like this, and that's just, like, when that gets imprinted into your mind as, like, that's the scary stuff, like, to this day, just about any of those will scare me or kind of get me racing more, with the exception of some of the CGI stuff that's obviously made to be invisible or augment the practical as is. But I'm not going to back down from the fact that I think it's good. Like, this stuff is well made. Like, Screaming Mad George, I will look up what else he's done, although he hasn't directed. He's directed like one other thing, and I'm not sure about it anyway. Why not tell you about the third act, since that's the thing that did repeatedly floor me. And it's also something that I'm not sure, upon telling you, it's going to spoil it all that much, because you really got to see the thing in action. So Sean's girlfriend, Misky, by the way, played by Vivian Wu, I believe it is. Yes, sorry, kind of the only thankless female role in the movie. Even that's not true. There's two thankless female roles in this particular movie. Berryman's girl is played by Spice Williams Crosby. But Misky is Sean's girlfriend, while simultaneously being the daughter of that scientist that fled with the Guyver unit once he realized that if the Zoolord got a hold of it, it would be bad news. She is captured. Mark Hamill is also captured and put in a Bacta tank. I mean, normal human-sized experiment tank, because Guyver Sean, like, already combined, was fighting as the Guyver, was actually killed when Berryman took, like, his third eye. He's got like a metal third eye, and he kind of rips that out of his head and he dissolves into goo. But Misky gets her hands on that third eye, although accidentally throws it into the mouth of one of the Zonoid scientists that has since transformed. And the Guyver reconstitutes himself from within that Zonoid and cuts his way out. I almost forgot about this. So he's got like kind of glaives on his elbow, like spikes. I don't know. I'll probably put a clip in right here. And when he cuts himself out, which almost physically doesn't make sense how he got that angle, it looks like a shark fin kind of cutting its way through a Zonoid, and they drop the Jaws stinger in there for just long enough. And then he pops out of the split Zonoid kind of majestically while turning to Misky and being like, I came back for you. So it's really sweet. Also, just tonal shifts that would make Sammo Hung blush in this thing, because it's still a comedy. Like, speaking of Power Rangers, do you remember, what was it, Bulk and Skull, right? Like, that's basically Lisker, Berryman's character, and his goons, one of which played by Jimmy J.J. Walker. That's basically them, just kind of bumbling their way throughout the show. Idiot. While also gruesomely transforming. Okay, I'm not even done. So they rescue Mark Hamill, but it's too late. And he transforms into like a huge cockroach in what is the most gruesome transformation that has happened. Yeah, like I can't even believe this is PG-13 to some extent. But it doesn't take, or he can't survive it. So he dies. Mark Hamill dies, like full on Island of Dr. Moreau style. And then the Zoolord transforms and has the final fight with the Guyver. It is just peak B-movie stuff, like B-movie with a budget. $3 million still isn't that much. Like I'm kind of amazed. And if you're thinking, well, if it's got the budget, isn't it just like an A movie at that point? No, it does have to be beheld. Honestly, if you haven't, and I'm sure you could. I feel bad. The YouTuber feels bad recommending you watch something on YouTube. Might be my problem, but if you need to or can, I don't even know if I threw in the clips of what I just talked about for want of you going to see this movie. So it's worth it. Have I mentioned the Guyver? So crazy. There's no chance I won't watch the sequel. I just don't know if it's... Could it not be worth a separate episode? I feel like that's impossible at this point. But it won't be next week. Next week is going to be... Oh, good. So I've been wanting to get back to Hong Kong action. You know, I'm not that I'm not enjoying movies like The Guyver and The Perfect Weapon, but it feels like I've been gone for a while here. Next week is Once Upon a Time in China, which is another film I've also been waiting on for a super long time, directed by Choi Hark. Come back for that next week, and hopefully we get to, because again, it's interesting at the very least to be like, this is what the States was doing, and then go back and see what Hong Kong was doing. But there should be no end to the other things you can enjoy on this channel. My daughter and I, in what has proven to be the least watched series of mine, maybe so far, we open up a new pack of Marvel cards from 1994, and we're, I think, coming up on the final 3 episodes, maybe 2, to see if we can actually complete that set. And then we're going to open up a whole new box. So if you want any say in that, I also have a video where I talk about the other options in the future for season 3. Let me know, and maybe we can up the numbers on that particular series. But also, like I said, we might do a stream this weekend where we put together some of those Lego kits. Actually, that's not true. I'm going to, in a wild, I say unrelated, but everything comes back to the channel somehow. I'm going to Punk in the Park in San Francisco on Saturday. So I'm sure I'll talk about that at some point, but it will preclude a stream of any sort on Saturday where we put together those Lego kits. So instead, you could like, subscribe, visit Patreon or PayPal, and help finance this crazy project of mine, or just let me know what you think down in the comments. That's probably a thing for this particular movie. I would hope so. So we'll see you next time.